surfing this beach pretty much my whole life, I guess, which is special.
What inspired you to start surfing?
My dad is a big surfer, so he got me into it when I was younger. I just kind of kept doing it since.
What is the future of surfing like in New Hampshire?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people are going to start shortboarding, but there's also the consideration of, climate change and all that stuff and how that's going to change surf breaks and the beaches around here.
Do you have a favorite surf shop?
Cinnamon Rainbows, definitely. Summer Sessions is good too, but Cinnamon Rainbows.
What comes to mind when you think about surfing in New Hampshire?
Fun waves, cold water. Yeah.
What is
Beaches
your
are really
favorite?
nice.
What is your favorite surfing memory and why?
My favorite surfing memory would probably be surfing with my brother on surf trips out in California.
Tell us how surfing is a big part of your life.
Well, I live down by the beach in Rhode Island, and I work as a surf instructor, and I teach a surf camp in the summer. So, yeah, I do spend a lot of time in the water.
How else is surfing related to life?
Less is more. Less is always more.
What inspired you to start surfing?
My love for the ocean and growing up around here and looking for another activity to do in the summer and the winter.
How do you handle the cold of surfing in New Hampshire?
Thick wetsuits.
What is your favorite surf shop in New Hampshire?
Cinnamon Rainbows.
How do you think climate change is going to affect surfing on the Seacoast in the future?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to make it better with warmer water, more storms. More storms equal more waves. It's unfortunate, but I think the winter's going to be warmer, making the surf season longer and more enjoyable, as it is.
How does surfing impact tourism in New Hampshire?
I think it's a big demand. I mean, look around at all the plates. You got Mass plates, you have main plates, and then you have a lot of plates from Quebec.
What comes to mind when you think about surfing in New Hampshire?
I love it. Even if I'm still not very good at surfing, so even if I'm just out there enjoying the waves and the tranquility, that's where it's at for me.
What is your favorite memory from surfing?
I grew up going to the ocean with my family, so my brother and I just being out there surfing in the waves and messing around.
How does surfing have an impact on your life?
It's just kind of one of those places you can just forget about work and everything going on in your life and all the stress and just relax. And
what comes to mind when you think about surfing in New Hampshire?
Just how lucky we are, this is a beautiful place, and how lucky we are to have such great waves here. And
what are your earliest memories of surfing?
My earliest memories of surfing in New Hampshire are probably back when I was just out of college and living in Boston in a small apartment. And so actually my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, who's actually Callan's mom, we used to come up and we had boards in the apartment, and then we would come up and we'd come up actually here to the wall, and we'd borrow some boards from Dave at Cinnamon Rainbows and go out, and no matter what the conditions were, we only had a summer suit like a 3-2, and we just go surf. So.
Can you describe your favorite memory of surfing in New Hampshire?
My favorite memory of surfing in New Hampshire. So my favorite memory of surfing in New Hampshire probably is about almost 8-10 years ago, probably a little somewhere between there. It was actually at Sawyer's, and actually involves a lot of the kids who were filming this project, and everyone was at the beach, and everyone was starting to learn to surf around that time. So.
Can you share your scariest and best surf experience in New Hampshire?
Yeah. Okay. So my sharing my scariest and best surf experience in New Hampshire. The scariest surf experience in New Hampshire that I can remember was at a spot not too far from here, where basically it's really rocky and it was really cold and really snowy actually. This was December, if I remember right. I think December or January during the football playoffs, and the Pats were in the playoffs. I had to run to my nieces and nephews' place after. But basically the waves were super big. It was snowing. It was cold. There was nobody else out, and I took off on a wave, ate it, and went down pretty far and kind of lost direction where I was going. Luckily came up and then got in the car and had to hustle over to watch the game.
Surfing in New Hampshire is special because I've always grown up surfing here, so it's like home.
What is your favorite beach to surf at, and why do you like it?
My favorite beach to surf at is either Cable or Shores because they're beach breaks, and I don't really like point breaks on rocks. So,
What
yeah.
inspired you to start surfing?
My dad, I'd say, because he got me into it at like an early age, and I just always liked it from there.
How do you think climate change is going to affect surfing on the Seacoast in the future?
I'm a little bit scared about I don't know if climate change affects this, but I'm a little bit scared about like sharks and stuff, and yeah, that kind of stuff.
How do you handle the cold when surfing in New Hampshire?
Bundle up.
What inspired you to start surfing?
I actually started boogie boarding, kind of like most kids do. And there were some other like local kids in the neighborhood that Ryman and I looked up to. And once I started when I was 6, I think Ryan started when he was 5. Once we got started, boogie boarding was a thing of the past, and surfing kind of took over.
What is the story behind summer sessions?
So I started it actually when I was 18, my freshman year in college. I got done my freshman year, and I was actually thinking about going into the Marines. And my parents, obviously in that timeline, were a little bit nervous about their baby boy going off to war. So they, offered me the opportunity to do something a little bit different that's, more in my wheelhouse as far as my passions. And my mom asked if I wanted to do a men's clothing store, and I was like, I don't want to do a men's clothing store, but I would do a surf shop. So I started my freshman year, and then Ryman took it over sophomore year because I was traveling abroad, and since then it's been a wrap.
Can you describe your favorite memory of surfing in New Hampshire?
Favorite memory of surfing in New Hampshire? Probably, it would have been 2008 or 2009, Hurricane Bill. It was probably one of the best hurricanes that's ever come up this coast. We surfed easily double overhead surf, and it was so big a lot of guys couldn't get out, so it was relatively uncrowded, and surfed it with all my homies, and I'd like to have that session back for sure.
What is your scariest experience from surfing?
Surfed a place called Chopu in Tahiti. That's a pretty intense reef break. They do the Tahiti Pro there, but it's a extraordinarily shallow reef, and I took off late on one and ended up getting spiked off the reef and thrown into the bay, and got basically full reef rash all down my back. Luckily didn't hit my head, but worst part of that is the live coral's not good in your skin, so they had to rub lemon rinds on my back to burn out the coral. So that was probably the heaviest experience.
What is your favorite beach to surf at, and why?
It's hard not to say Genis just because it's right here across the street. I surf it the most. It's our home break. It's not always the best waves, but it's always fun. You're always out there with the boys. And when we get waves at home, there's nothing better.
And how was Rye Junior High when you were there?
I loved Rod Junior High. Rod Junior High is the bomb. Some of my best experiences and memories are from that timeline, so enjoy it.
Can you talk about how surf scenes have changed over the years?
There's definitely a lot more people surfing. Like when we started surfing, that was almost 30 plus years ago, there's a much smaller community, and I actually think that's been pretty cool to see the surf community build around here. One thing that's definitely changed is the caliber of wetsuit, because when I was surfing, especially like winter surf back in the day, it was not a fun undertaking. In like a 7 mil suit, you could barely move, feet are freezing, and I used to have to bike down here, which is hardcore. But yeah, I mean, one of the other cool things that's definitely changed is when I was surfing, that like it was pretty much a male-dominated sport. It's almost only guys, and now, especially like because we do a lot of kids camps, it's closer to almost 50-50 in our kids camp programming. So seeing that change has also been really, really cool. Yeah, I just like seeing more people in the water and getting a chance to explore this awesome sport.
Can you share your scariest experience about surfing in New Hampshire?
Scariest experience in New Hampshire, my brother and I decided to go out on probably one of the biggest hurricane days. It was it wasn't a hurricane, it was a massive nor'easter. And down at Ryan the Rocks, which is kind of a little point break down the way, the entire bay was basically closing out, which I'd never seen happen before. And as soon as we hit the water, it sucked us all the way out towards Fox Hill and kind of out around the corner. The rip was so bad. And it took, like, we barely even caught a wave, but it took us almost an hour and a half to paddle back in. And by the time we got in, we're both barely hanging on. So learned a valuable lesson that day.
What was surfing like, and how has it evolved?
The major changes in surfing really were probably only about 18 years ago. Surfing was allowed between 10 and 5 during the day, during the summertime. So really, we grew up not being able to surf every day in the summer between 10 and 5. So really, my brother and I learned how to surf on big bodyboards. So that was a massive change. That changed because Rye was going to try and ban surfing completely, before, after, every day. So that changed when we, about the second year into running our shop, and that was something that Steve Clark championed and a lot of local surfers here in Rye, and Hampton and Northampton really pushed. And so instead of banning surfing completely, we actually opened up surfing so that you guys, myself, all of our friends can surf every day whenever we want. So that is the most monumental change for me, because we used to have to, when we did want to surf during the day, we'd have to grab our board and we'd walk down to Sawyer's, and that was the only beach you could actually surf on between those 10 and 5 time frames when the lifeguards were around. So that was a pretty big change for sure.
What is surfing like today in New Hampshire?
The way it is today, I think it's cool because you have a lot more kids doing it. So you have a lot more energy, a lot more groups, where when I was younger, it was, you know, there was like a group that was 2 years older than me that I looked up to, and those were the people that I looked up to surf. And there was a group that was, you know, right behind me, where here you have lots of different groups. And I think that the sport has evolved in the sense that people are enjoying it just for whatever it may be. There's no out of bounds, there's no I have to make the shot or score. And in a world of super organized sports that we're all in, where we're at academies and programs, and this allows you to go and be active, and there are no rules, and you can have fun however you want to do it. Whether now you're on a soft top, you're on a longboard, you're on a fish, you're on a single fin. There's just so many options to have fun, and I think that's the key, and a lot of kids doing it.
What is your prediction for the future of surfing in New Hampshire?
The prediction for the future of surfing. Well, I think there's more people surfing in wintertime because the wetsuits have gotten a lot better. So we're seeing a lot more people get out there and have fun in the winter, and we're getting through the mentality of we only snowboard and ski in the winter, but we're cold on the lift, we can get frostbite, my hands are cold, my feet are cold, so now we have wetsuits that make it warmer and easier to kind of get out there in the winter. So I think that's allowing, you know, I remember I kind of really got into winter surfing when I was in 5th and 6th grade, And now I'm finding that more and more kids are getting into winter surfing, so I find that's going to be a big change for the future for sure.
What is special about surfing in New Hampshire to you?
I think the special parts of New Hampshire are, for me, it's the friends. We've been lucky to travel quite a bit, but I would give up full perfection a lot of times to be with my brother, with my friends, and surfing a spot where we have it, close to ourselves, or get a couple waves together. We also have a beautiful coastline, so we have a lot of nooks and crannies where when you look at Jersey and New York and a lot of these other spots, it's really just one flat beach all the way down. So we have the beauty of being able to find these little nooks and crannies depending on the wind direction. So I can go up north, I can go into Maine. There's so many spots that we can still explore, and we do kind of tend to go to our easier locations, but if you explore, there's a lot to the north that you can, explore and find. And we have lots of spots around here that are fun to catch when the winds and conditions are right.
I wanted to let you guys know I started surfing in 1964, and I was 16 years old, and my father gave me for my 16th birthday a board that I designed. I sent it away to California, and they sent it back to me. It was a 9'6" Gordy, which was made at Huntington Beach, California, and that was, everybody had big long logs. They called them logs back then. They were so heavy. They had like 2 layers of cloth, and not just lightweight cloth, but heavyweight cloth, hard to ding. And from there it evolved to shortboards. There was in 1970 probably, they started to ride shorter boards, shorter and shorter and shorter, and they all had one fin. And then in 1971, these 2 boys from California named the Campbell Brothers, this is one of their surfboards. They started making a 3-fin board that had a channel in the bottom and 2 canted fins. This one probably has the canted fins on it. I don't want to drop it. And that created a looser, faster board because of the Venturi principle. Does anybody know about the Venturi principle? Okay, well, I'm going to give you a teacher. I have a copy of this. This shows how the water flows underneath the surfboard, and because it's going from low pressure to high pressure, it accelerates the water, and the board goes faster. And it's also very responsive. And then I was meant to tell you guys about the thruster was designed in 1980 by a guy named Simon Anderson from Australia. And that's what 90% of all these boards are now, are 3-fin thruster boards. So that's what everybody's riding. Not so many people ride this, but I'm stoked on that board and that concept. So I've got all kinds of boards. I got 3 in the back of my truck that are Bonzers too. So I guess that's.
What are your earliest memories of surfing in New Hampshire?
Surfing in New Hampshire pretty much started got popular in the mid '60s, and my memory is we would come down to the parking lot across the street, which wasn't a state parking lot; it was a town parking lot, and so we just hung out there at night and surfed during the day, and there was not so many surfers as there are today. There's a lot of surfers out there now. How many of you guys surf?
Almost all.
All right, nice. Did you go take lessons from Ryan or his group?
No.
No, okay. Yeah.
What is special about surfing in New Hampshire to you?
Special. I gotta cheat on this just for a second. I'll tell. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. New Hampshire has a unique coastline here. It's I've surfed almost every state between Maine and Florida, and this unique meteorological phenomenon here is when the storms go across us and go out to sea, they generate the waves, and then because it's a low pressure out there, the wind goes to the low pressure, which gives you offshore winds, and those are probably the best kind of waves to surf because they stay open longer, and you can rip them like Ryan does.
Are there any surfers in New Hampshire that inspire you? If so, who and why?
John Taylor comes to mind. And he unfortunately died in 2014. He was a younger kid, and he used to ride his bike from Drakeside Road in Hampton when he was 14 to we surfed right here. That was about the only place then. And he had a little trailer for his bike, and he never put on a full wetsuit. He was always wearing like a short john. He must have had incredible cold blood or warm blood or whatever the deal is. But, yeah, John Taylor is in memoriam of John Taylor. He was one of the most unique characters that we had.
How many years have you been surfing in Rye?
Well, I began as a body surfer and I ended as a body surfer. My greatest memory of surfing in Rye was August 1966. I was with my friend Dana Young. There was a hurricane about 500 miles offshore, but it was sunny and windy, the water was warm, and the waves were unbelievable. And we threw ourselves out, and there were no surfboards, I don't remember then, but we body surfed, and those waves would just throw us onto the beach like dead fish almost, and we would throw ourselves back. I was so waterlogged, but that was a great memory. But that's what I did. I grew up Foss Beach, this beach, Ball Sands, all those beaches body surfing, because there weren't really any even boogie boards around when I was young. So that's my memory, but I've always been interested in surfing because of watching people later in the 1900s and then becoming aware of the McGills and so forth. And then because I've become the town historian, it's got me interested in writing up the history of surfing.
What is your take on tourism and surfing in Rye?
Well, I know in the summertime it's tough and it's created a lot of difficulty, and there's been a lot of meetings, especially over the last 20 years or so, because so many people descend on the beach. And as you know, this is a state road out here. Ocean Boulevard is Route 1A. And Genesee Beach, as a state beach, started in 1962. Before that, it was just a town beach. Same with Ball Sands in 64. That's when that huge parking lot was built. So once those state beaches are created, you get even more people because there's more parking, and yet there's not enough parking. So it looks like Coney Island in New York here in the summer, trying to drive down here at the height of summer on the 4th of July. It's crazy. And yet it's that way all over the world. People, tourists, locals, we just gravitate to the water, obviously. And, we just have to learn what to do and how to accommodate all the people and have drivers and so forth, and just don't expect to be able to park your car. And yet everybody needs to, and the swimmers and the surfers have to figure out how to get along, right?
Do you think the Rye locals are pro or anti-surfing on Rye beaches?
I don't have a clear picture of that, but I would think on balance people appreciate it because a lot of Rye people like to surf, even if they were just body surfers, but they appreciate that people want to be up on boards or boogie boards. So I would think the majority support it, but I don't have an actual clear picture.
What was controversial to surfing in Rye in the past?
Well, as I've stated before, it's going back to the 60s, as Steve talked about in his interview, there were designated places for surfers, and sometimes it was very restrictive, and you had to wear orange vests and so forth. And so at that time, at least the police in the 60s were not very supportive of surfers and made it difficult. after 1970, the new police chief was much more accommodating for surfers. So it's less controversial. And yet, the last 20 years, and Ryan can tell you a lot more about this, so you should ask him about it because he's the one that runs some of the sessions.
How did surfing originate in Rye?
Well, surfing was introduced to the East Coast by Duke Kamanamoku of Hawaii. He was a native Hawaiian with other native Hawaiians. They're the ones that introduced to the West Coast. And then Duke, who won Olympic gold medals for swimming in 1912, he introduced it to the East Coast after World War I. And it just took off. But you really start to see it after World War II a lot more because then, as Steve told you, you get those surfboards. Yeah.
How did the greater interest in the surfing industry and surfing relate to tourism spikes in Rye?
Well, I think there's a deep connection. If you look at our beaches compared to other beaches, the unique thing about Rye is we have 3 brilliant crescent beaches. You know, you got a headland, so it's shaped like a crescent. You get on Hampton Beach, it's just straight as an arrow. And so there's a really great appeal here, and I think you get better wave action. And one of the best examples of that would be Bass Beach. And you know how you go south of the boulevard where the Northampton Rye line is, the 2 little cottages are? Bass Beach. I know there was a lot of great surfing there back in the 60s and 70s.